Dot knows. Just so you know, the recording has started. Okay. Well, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Sue Osthoff, and I'm at the National Clearinghouse for the Defense of Battered Women, which is in Philadelphia, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. This webinar was actually originally presented on April 23rd. Unfortunately, we had terrible tech difficulties, and most people ended up getting booted off and weren't able to get back on. So our speakers, all three of them, very generously agreed to redo the webinar so you can hear the whole presentation and others can have access to the recording. So thank you all very much. Before we begin the presentation, I'll go over a few logistics for today's webinar, and I'll do this as quickly as I can so I can turn it over to our wonderful speakers. If you are disconnected from the webinar at any time, just go back to that original email that you got early this morning and click on the link again to log back in. If you have any problems getting back on, please call iLink Support at 800-799-4510. Our assistant for today's webinar, Dot Goldberger, she'll type that into the chat box as well. And let's talk about that chat box. If you go down to the lower left-hand corner of your screen, you will see the little chat box, or you should be seeing that little chat box. And to use it, move your cursor over into the chat box and click on it. And then you enter your text, and then you hit the Enter key to submit it. So why don't we try that? If you could let us know where you were calling from, and your name will pop up so you don't have to put your name, just say where you're calling from. And if you could also let us know if there's more than one person at your site. So if there's 3 of you there, you can say, it's me plus 2. That's really helpful. Thank you very much for all of you who are entering that. Oh, great. That's helpful to see. Oh, and thank you for letting us know how many people are there. Thank you, Dot, for letting me know that there's 2 of you down the hall. That's very helpful. So thank you. Laura, we've got folks from all around the country here so far. We have, and like I said, we had over 250 signed up, so we'll see how many others join us as we go on. As you know, I think all participants are muted, so we're going to be using that chat feature for any questions, problems, or comments you have. And we'll be collecting the questions during the webinar, and time allowing, we'll pose as many as we can to the presenters at the end of today's presentation. And I'll acknowledge that I see your question, just so you know that I have got it. If you are joining us by phone only, you can email Dot with any questions, and her email is dot.dot at ncdbw.org, which are our organizational initials. We are recording this webinar today, and you'll be able to access this on our website in about a week. We've also posted today's PowerPoint in a version that you can save and or print, bios of today's presenters, and a few handouts on Google Drive. That link was in our reminder note that you got this morning, and Dot will post it again here. And if you're signed into iLink now and you have the PowerPoint up, you don't need to go and get that PowerPoint from Google Drive now unless you want to take notes on it. Also, shortly after the completion of the webinar, it's about a half hour after it, you'll get an email from me, and it will contain a confirmation of your attendance, also a link to our posted recordings of our other webinars, and a very brief survey. And that same little survey, that same evaluation will pop up at the end of the webinar if you'd prefer to answer it immediately following the webinar. And we would really greatly appreciate it if you would fill it out. It takes probably about 2 minutes. Your feedback is just very helpful to us and to the presenters as well. So, that's always interesting. So we're going to ask a couple of questions because it's also helpful to the presenters to know who's actually on this webinar. And I'm just giving you directions here, which is I'm going to pull up these questions. Are you seeing the questions, if you can let me know? Renee and Katrina, yes?
Yes, they're here.
Okay. So the first question is, how do you describe your profession? If you can answer by clicking on the dot immediately to the left of your answer, that is really terrific. So don't write it in the chat box unless you click Other. If you click Other, then go ahead and tell us how you describe your profession in the chat box. So if we could take a couple of seconds to do that. And I'm putting the results up there. So we've got, okay, that's really helpful. So we've got a lot of community-based advocates, and let's see, over there we have military victim advocate, mental health professional, victim advocate with district attorney's office, assistance-based advocate. Okay, that's very helpful. And if you're an OVW grantee, if you could let us know and what kind of OVW grantee you are, that's also very helpful. We have a probation person, community-based advocate, tribal advocate, maybe, Kayla, you could let us know. Okay, thank you very much. That's definitely helpful. So thank you. We'll go back to the webinar itself. So for those of you who just joined, I know a couple of you just joined, I just will let you know that I'm Sue Osthoff with the National Clearinghouse for the Defense of Battered Women. And thank you all for joining us for this webinar. And as I mentioned earlier, this webinar was originally presented in April, and unfortunately we had terrible tech difficulties. So our speakers are very generously redoing it today so that we really will have an opportunity to hear the entire presentation, and so that we'll also have a recording of it for others to view in the future. I'd like to take a little poll. Right above that chat box you see a little feedback, and there's a little green yes, a little pink no, and then there's no answer. For those of you on the computer, if you attended the first webinar that the I'm Free staff and volunteers did in April, could you click yes? If you did not, if you'd click on no, that would be really helpful. Get a sense of how many people were on that first one. Okay, we've got 4 yes, 6 no, and 7 no answer at this point. Okay, thank you. Thank you for all the feedback. It's very helpful. This webinar is actually the 11th or 11th and a half, since this is a redo, in our series of webinars about when survivors reenter the communities after jail or prison. And before we go any further, I really want to take a second to thank the Office on Violence Against Women and the Family Violence Prevention and Services Program of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services for the support of this webinar. And we think it's just really great that they are supporting work that is focused on survivors who are reentering their communities after being in jail or prison. So as you're probably aware, today's webinar is titled, Her Size 10 Feet Won't Fit Comfortably in His Size 10 Shoes, Working with Reentering Victims of Trauma. And in an effort to save time, I'll do really a very brief introduction of our speakers today, Dr. Renea Furtick-Whelan and Ms. Patrina Young. And they're the co-founders of I'm Free, Females Reentering Empowering Each Other, which is based here in Philadelphia. And as you may be able to see from the slide, I'm sorry about the really small type, the first paragraph there is a joint bio for our two speakers. Laura, a third speaker, will tell you more about herself when we get to her later in the presentation. You will see that that first paragraph discusses the work that Dr. Renea and Patrina have done together creating and running I'm Free. And then below that paragraph, you'll see additional information about each speaker individually. These bios are also posted on Google Drive, and we'll hope you'll take some time to look at them more closely at some point. You'll also find copies of the PowerPoint in 2 different versions. Some general handouts about incarcerated women are there as well. And Dot, maybe you could repost the Google Drive link. And it really is an honor for me to get to introduce our speakers today. I met Dr. Renea and Patrina, I guess it's almost 4 years ago now, and I've had the pleasure to get to know them through a series of peer-to-peer meetings that a few of us here at the National Clearinghouse have had with them over the years. And since Dr. Renea and Patrina will be discussing their organization and programming during the webinar, I'm not going to take time to talk about that now. And you can read about the rich experiences and their awards and all the different things that they've done over the years. But what their bios don't talk about is their passion for their work, their amazing tenacity, and their willingness to do the work, and even when resources are super tight, because they know how needed it really is. And what their bios don't say is how extraordinarily committed they both are to keeping it real with each other, with their colleagues, and with the women who participate in their program. They do this work with their authentic selves, and I think that is how all the best work is done. So we're really pleased to have them once again as our presenters today. And I know they have a lot to share, so I really want to move on. Just a reminder that I'll be collecting questions for our speakers from the chat box. So if you have any questions, please put them in that chat box. And the goal is to leave about 15 minutes at the end for questions. So thank you so much, Dr. Renea and Patrina, for all your great work, and thank you for your willingness to share it once again with all of us today. And without further ado, I'm going to turn the mic over to you two. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Hi, everyone. This is Patrina, and I think I said last time that we've spoken to groups locally, nationally, and internationally, and back in April was our first webinar, so maybe we can say that was our first dry run, and this is really our first webinar. So we're excited to be here with all of you. And if I can just share for a minute the mission of I'm Free. Our work is to advance the life chances of women who are transitioning from corrections to community by doing three things. We advocate for gender-responsive and trauma-informed care. We provide consultation to agencies, and we offer innovative services and support for justice-involved women and their families. And today we'll take a look at some of the innovative services that I'm Free offers. And I just remembered, Sue, that I need to advance the slides, and let's see, is this it? That's it, okay.
And hello, this is Dr. Renea, and just a quick snapshot of what we're going to cover today. We're going to focus on gender-responsive and trauma-informed care, talk a little about trauma and PTSD and the sisters who are behind the walls. We're going to share a little bit about our training that we do, the curriculum that we came up with, and we call it T1W, which is Transforming One Woman at a Time. Share a little bit about our philosophy and how we work, and how we work our philosophy inside the prison and out. We're going to explore some intimate, sorry, just something just popped up for a second. Explore inmate partner violence. I'm sorry, intimate partner violence. We're going to look at some of the barriers. And lastly, we have an awesome presenter who is going to share her story from when she was behind the walls.
And her name is Laura Jimenez.
Yes. And so gender responsive and trauma-informed care, we talk about that. And so what does it really mean? For us at I'm Free, when we think about it, we look at it in terms of taking universal precautions. And just like, we've been trained that if you happen to come upon an accident and someone is bleeding, you take precautions. You protect yourself. And so one of the things that we like to talk about is when we are working with our women, we want to take universal precautions and make sure, one, that we are not re-traumatizing her. We want to make sure that she's okay. We model the behavior that we want when we are with her, when we're in the prison and when we're out. Inside the prison, we create a very structured, safe environment, if you will. And we get her as long as with ourselves. We we talk about trusting the process. And what does that mean? There is so much going on behind those walls that we have to get her to see that we're really there to learn from her, to work with her, to lift her up, and we also have to trust the process when we're working with her as well.
Now, some of you are probably familiar with this chart, but what we're looking at here is the number of women in state and federal prisons between 1980 and 2012. And what's clear is that the number of women that were incarcerated from 1980 to 2012, the numbers completely skyrocketed. And in 1980s is about when the war on drugs began. And I'm not one to remember a lot of statistics, but when we began doing the research back in 2010 to decide whether or not we wanted to start an organization, one of the things that we read, and it just really stuck with me, was the number 888. There was an 888% increase in the number of women who were arrested for drug-related offenses. And so today we have over 1 million women under the criminal justice supervision. And so that's including women who are in state and federal prisons, county jails, probation, and parole as well. And about 1/3 have been incarcerated for drug offenses. These women are disproportionately women of color, undereducated, from lower socioeconomic statuses, unskilled, limited vocational training. Half were unemployed at the time of their arrest. These women are in their early to mid-30s, come from fragmented family histories. They have other family members who have been incarcerated. They are survivors of physical and or sexual abuse. They have significant substance abuse histories and multiple physical and mental health problems. And these women, about 65 to 70%, are mothers, and most of them were the primary caretakers at the time of their arrest. And one more thing that these women have in common is that with untreated trauma and substance abuse, these women tend to cycle back into the prison system over and over again.
The data show that most of the women who are behind the walls, they've experienced abuse, either in their childhood or in their adult lives. And there are larger studies out there that found prior abuse in women who are incarcerated to be about 50%. And there are also smaller studies that are more in-depth studies that have found the rate to be anywhere from 70 to 95%. And a third of the women who are incarcerated, a third of the women to 95% of the women who are incarcerated has experienced childhood or intimate partner abuse.
So we've mentioned trauma a number of times. And SAMHSA defines trauma as individual trauma results from an event, a series of events, or a set of circumstances that are experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or threatening, and that have lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. So what's traumatic to one person may not necessarily be traumatic to another. But what's clear here is that these events or series of events affect aspects of her whole being.
And so the women who have suffered trauma who are incarcerated, that trauma often goes unaddressed, if you will. And because it goes unaddressed or treated, the women begin to self-medicate. And when they begin to do that, they find themselves in a lot of trouble. And so the other thing is that the repeated experiences like poverty or domestic violence is that can also lead to trauma in the women as well. So the data show that there's the majority of women who are incarcerated are uneducated, low income, unemployed, or underemployed. And if you take that into consideration, along with their socioeconomic status, on top of the abuse that she's endured, the probability of her having some form of trauma is great.
And we know that trauma can result from a wide variety of events. And in this particular graphic, we're looking at the number of things that a woman might experience. So I think we can all agree that childhood abuse is traumatic. But what if her mother was incarcerated and this young girl ends up in the foster care system? Perhaps she was sexually assaulted in her foster home or as a teenager. She experienced or witnessed violent crime. She was surrounded by chronic stressors like racism and poverty. And then she finds the love of her life. Women are abused by people that say they love them. For men, it tends to be by a stranger. But either way, all of these events can be traumatic.
And so that untreated trauma or the trauma that the women have experienced that Katrina just talked about, they can actually end up being the pathways, leading to pathways that the women take into the criminal justice system. So let's take the young woman that Katrina talked about who, as a child, she was sexually abused or even physically abused. That young woman begins to act out. And so in acting out, she becomes a little more aggressive. She's failing in school. She is just fighting more, running away from home. And unfortunately, what happens is that young girl then gets labeled, put into the system, and labeled as a delinquent, if you will. Or you have the woman who is being abused at home by her a family member or her partner. She doesn't know how to deal with that. She begins to use to cope with the situation, and using, she may also find herself in that system. Or a woman who is in an intimate partner violent situation or abusive situation, if you will. She finds herself being forced to do certain things that she doesn't want to do, and she fights back, and she can end up in the system that way. Or a woman who is just in an impoverished situation. She can find herself losing a job, not having benefits, not being able to take care of her family or her home, and then she goes and she does something and finds herself in the system. All of these situations are traumatizing and could end up causing this woman to have PTSD. And so what we've recognized with the women who are incarcerated is that a majority of them that are behind the walls suffer from multiple forms of abuse. We see the PTSD, some of the signs of PTSD in the women when they attend our trainings. Some of them are hyper aroused. They are easily angered. I mean, they can literally go from 0 to 100 with the anger. They talk about not being able to sleep, being afraid to sleep, not being comfortable. When they hear the click of the door, what that makes them feel like. They talk about just feeling numb, or the feeling that they do have or that they can talk about is anger.
And according to the DSM-5, PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder is in an individual an individual must meet 4 specific criteria following a traumatic event to be considered having PTSD. And the 4 are on your screen. The first, re-experiencing the trauma, so flashbacks and nightmares. So not just remembering it, but feeling as though you are right there re-experiencing it. It's happening right now. There's avoidance behavior, so avoiding people, places, scents, anything that's associated with that traumatic event. There's heightened arousal in someone, so feeling hyper aware of their environment. So imagine just always being on and never having a moment to just kind of relax and settle down. And then having negative beliefs and feelings, so whether that's anger, fear, guilt, or shame surrounding the event as well. And what it says is, if a person displays all 4 types of these responses to a traumatic event for more than 4 weeks following that event, then they may fit the criteria for PTSD. So it's a word that we tend to throw around quite a bit, but there are specific criteria for being diagnosed with PTSD. And then the effects of PTSD on women, it affects their ability to learn, their creativity, productivity, and their general well-being. And what we've tried to do is to get the women, along with the COs, the correctional officers in the jail that we work in, and the warden, to see the results of PTSD and how it shows up and is perceived as negative behavior, which is then dealt with punitively by the system. Instead of stopping and addressing her real issues, the presenting ones get the attention. So there was an example that I heard recently about a young woman who attended group on a regular basis. And this one day she approaches the classroom or the room where they're meeting, and there's a door open next door. And this door has never been opened before, and today it was ajar, and it really unsettled her, if that's a word, made her unsettled. And so instead of being able to describe what she was feeling and that she was uncomfortable and didn't understand what was behind that door and why that door was open, instead she goes to group and says, "This is stupid, who wants to be here anyway? You know, who's getting anything out of this?" And because of her behavior, was dismissed. When instead, if someone had just said to her, "What's going on? This is new behavior for you. What are you feeling? What's the anxiety?" They could have de-escalated the situation, calmed her nerves about what or what wasn't behind that door, and then been able to carry on as usual. So those possible negative consequences of, in this case, her not being able to continue in group that day when she probably really needed it, is unfortunately what happens on the inside.
So because of the way we operate in terms of what Katrina was just talking about, and we really want to be trauma-informed and gender responsive, we actually work to create, if you will, a paradigm shift, not just with the women that we work with, but also with the staff that are in the prison as well. And we also want the women to understand what it means to be trauma-informed and gender responsive, because when we're working together, we do a lot of individual, one-on-one, group work, so we want her to understand the direction that we're going in. So the old way of asking questions was, "What's wrong with you?" Well, if you ask me what's wrong with me, and especially if you're asking me in a judgmental tone, then most likely I'm not going to give you any information. So instead, what we try to do for the women and to teach them is to ask the question differently. So instead of "What's wrong with you?" what happened to you, and how can we help you? When we're working with the women who have substance abuse issues, we don't ask her, why the addiction, but rather, why the pain? And if I can, just for a second, there was a sister that we worked with who was, I want to say she did wet as her drug of choice, and we started to talk to her about her pain and she began to share that her father died, but the way she talked about it was that he left her. And so the more we were able to get her to share and to open up and to talk about that situation and to deal with that pain, at one point she had this aha moment, if you will, where she literally said, wow, my father didn't leave me. He actually died. And I have been beating myself up, using substances, been in so much pain as a result of that. So she was able to make that shift, which was beautiful in that moment. And so we try not to ask the judgmental questions. Why did you stay in that abusive relationship? How about a lot of women aren't going to, especially if you're being judgmental, they're not going to talk to you about that abusive relationship. So we have to find ways of getting her to share that information. So if we are able to ask her, if you are in one of those situations, will you be comfortable finding a place, a safe place? Or do you have a safe word? Do you have a person that you can say, here is what's happening to me. If I ever call you and I say this word, you know that I'm in trouble. How about if we begin to teach from that perspective, if you will? We had an opportunity to just recently, the session before the one we just ended, work with the Administrative Segregation Unit. And while I believe a lot of the women who are entering in and out of that system, there's a lot of underlying stuff that we don't know about. And so we recognize the iceberg effect whenever we're working with the women that we work with. We work with these women, and it was about 5 of them, and there were days that they would come in to the space and they would be extremely angry. But we, because of the way we work, and we recognize that there is more going on than what we see, and plus all of the punitive, the punitive nature of that unit, we try to get her to deal with her situation in a very non-threatening way, if you will. And we allow her, or all of the women, to explore different ways of sharing who she is. So some people may not be comfortable talking or writing things out. So we use poetry, we use storytelling, whichever way we needed to get her to share her information so that she can begin that healing process. We wanted to use different learning modalities, if you will, to get her to do that.
And this graphic is representing the beginning of the journey when we meet the women. And it starts with our 6-week class. It's called Transforming One Woman at a Time, Reintegration Support. And the first 6 weeks are cognitive behavioral transformation focused, if you will. Each week we have a different theme. We are with the women for 2 hours once a week, and we're covering things like attitude, crime, corrections, and criminal behavior, fear and how it might be holding you back, looking at self-esteem through self-assessments, looking at her anger management skills and how she resolves conflict. And then in the last week, we're looking at goal setting and support systems that she has for when she gets out. And to date, we've worked with about a little over 200 women in the last 3 years. We're currently working at Riverside Correctional Facility. It's the local Philadelphia County Jail for women. And we've also worked with some women in community corrections here in Philadelphia. And we have been very deliberate in our approach. Our curriculum was designed for women, so we did not take a male-centered curriculum and then adapt it for women. Our class is not mandated. There have been a few judges who said that their women needed to take a reentry class, and they have shown up, but for the most part, the women who are in our 6-week class are there because they've chosen to. maybe a little nudging from their social worker. We create a routine. We read out loud. We have the women begin to become comfortable asking for help. And they also stand and deliver, where we have them share their stories.
So our basic philosophy is all about empowering our sisters, and it's about lifting her up and letting her know that she is worthy. And so we believe in shared knowledge and learning. We do not believe that when we enter the space, just because we have initials behind our names, that's going to give us the authority to say that we're the experts in this. We truly believe that the women that we work with, they are the experts in their own lives. And so we talk about and we practice positive affirmation. We pour into them. We even, there is a South African tradition that whenever there's someone in the community who is acting out of a negative space, if you will, they will call a meeting, get the group together, and instead of talking about the things that are negative about that person, they begin to lift them up. They talk about the positive things about her, or about them. And so with us, we truly believe that we are our sister's keeper, and so we work hard to show her the positive stuff, and the group as well buy into this and begin to work these techniques as well. We do not believe in a throwaway woman. We empower her to stand in her glory and take back her voice. We actually believe in seeking wisdom and knowledge from those who have gone before us. So we work with women who are forensic peer specialists, women who have been in the system. Some of them may have some mental health challenges, but they are on the outside. They are now working. They're doing their treatment. They're doing what they have to do. We get them to mentor, if you will, these women, the women that we work with, so that they can see that there are women who have been in the same situation, who's transitioned out of that prison and into their communities and are doing well. We believe that a woman's past does not equal her future, nor does it dictate her present.
So how do we help women to trust the process? We do a number of things. We create a space that allows for safety, trust, choices, collaboration, empowerment. And so part of that safety is creating a routine. And so when the women come in, oftentimes we can have up to 20 women who, some of whom know each other and others who do not know each other. And so sometimes they're a little reluctant to share with these women that they don't know. But through the routines that we create and building expectations, they begin to trust the process. They begin to trust each other. Some of the things that we'll do just to give women choices, because you know, when you're incarcerated, people are telling you what to do all the time, and you have very few choices. So where they want to sit, they can choose that. The order that they check in the at the beginning of groups, they can choose that. We break into smaller groups each class time, and so they can choose who they want to work with. The order that they report out, when they stand and deliver, and simple things like their nameplate. You know, in the first class, we give them a table tent to put your name on it. And we give them a choice. What color marker do you want? And, you know, so they choose that. And then weekly we use things like reward stickers. And they can pick which sticker they want. So some of those things are very little things. But I mean, the stickers, they are huge on the inside because the women really feel like they've accomplished something. And it's an outward way that other people can see that she's accomplished something. Giving them choices, the collaboration. We truly believe that what we do is a two-way street. The first day we stand up in front of the class and we tell them what they can expect over the next 6 weeks. But after that, we sit down and we let the women lead. So it's definitely a two-way street in that we're sharing with them, they're sharing with us, we're learning from each other. It's not us being there as the experts and forcing our opinions on the women. And empowerment. It's all about empowering her, encouraging her to see her potential by believing in herself, regardless of her past, and with no judgment. And as Dr. Renee has said, when someone might be acting out of place of hurt, we have the women in the group help her to identify the good in her, help her to lift her up, and to build healthy, functioning adult relationships and friendships. And I saw one of the questions. Sue told me before not to look at the questions, but I looked, and so I want to address this now. Somebody asked what other learning modalities we use, and so we do have a written assignment. In class, we do group work, and they do have to do it together. So one might be the recorder, one might be the timekeeper, one might be the reporter, but each day, at the end of the day, we have a takeaway assignment that they have to work on. Not all of the women have graduated high school or have a GED or read at the same reading level, so we do read everything out loud so that everybody is on the same playing field, at least in the classroom. And again, part of encouraging her to ask for help is that when she's back on the unit and she's working on her assignment, that she's comfortable enough to ask someone else to help her with it if there's something she doesn't know. So besides the written assignments, we do a lot of drawing and coloring and if you will, having the women use a different side of their brain. So on the 5th week, we have them, their assignment is to draw everything. They can't use any words. And they complain, but they have a great time with it. The standing and delivering, you know, so again, I said some women have difficulty with reading, some have difficulty with writing. And, you know, we tell them when you stand up there and you're delivering your assignment or your piece, nobody needs to know what's on that paper. You know your story, and you can tell your story. And it's all about giving her the confidence to stand there and deliver, whether it's what her paper says or not, but she can deliver that in front of a group of people. Okay. Again, helping her to trust the process. It's showing compassion. So understand that she may be feeling both shame and stigma. So we really try to create a space where compassion outweighs the shame and stigma that she may be feeling. And we have lots of transformational moments. So, you know, the aha moments, for example, the one Dr. Renee had talked about, where the woman was in class and it finally dawned on her that her father didn't leave her. He died, and why should she blame herself for that and continue to punish herself 30-some years later? But also, it's taking ownership for their situation. So what role did you play in anything that got you here, in the argument last night, whatever the case may be? Taking ownership for your situation is really important. As I mentioned before, asking for help. There are 4 questions that we ask each class at the beginning. It's part of our check-in. It's who are you? And we're looking for something beyond your name. How are you feeling? And some of the women use okay. They don't know. So we give out a sheet with different emotions on it the first day, and it's nice to see them looking through the sheet to find the exact perfect feeling that they're feeling that day. What's your goal for today, and who can you ask for help? And in the beginning, you'll hear a lot of, I can't ask anyone for help, I don't ask anyone for help, it's between me and my God, maybe my cellie, maybe my mom. And by the end, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th week, they are calling on the other women that are in the room. They're calling on I'm free, that they can ask us for help. We ask the women to try on new behaviors. You know, let's just try something a little different. We're not asking anybody to make a complete change and change who she is. Who she is important, and she's the only one who's like that. But perhaps if you shifted just a little bit, you might get different results than you've gotten in the past. And then we're also creating language that is not damaging. So Sue mentioned in the beginning about us being authentic with ourselves and with the women and just being real. And we allow them to be themselves, whomever they are, whatever that means. But if someone uses language that could be hurtful to herself or to someone else, afterwards we suggest something else that she might want to use. So for example, one day we had a woman during check-in and we asked, who are you? And she referred to herself as a criminal. And we asked her, is that how you want to be known? Is that how we should refer to you? And she said no. And I said, well, then don't introduce yourself as that, you know. So let's change the language. Let's empower her. Let's all begin to use language that's not hurtful.
So I love this quote, and I've had people who disagreed with this, but whatever you do, don't try to escape from the pain, but be with it, because the attempt to escape from the pain is what causes more pain. And when we look at the sisters that are behind the walls, and we talk to them and we see that they are in a lot of pain, the thing that drove a lot of the sisters to their pain and to the addiction and to their unhealthy behaviors and unhealthy relationships is not being able to, if you will, deal with the pain. So they literally try to escape. And you hear them talk about, well, when I get high, I don't have to deal with the pain. So then the question becomes, what happens once you are not high? And so we love to allow the women to really be in that pain, deal with the pain, and we have to do it. We understand that we are in the jail, and so we have to do it carefully. And if we are ever in a situation where a woman is really willing to and has exposed a lot of her pain in the class, the first thing we will do is after the class make sure that the social worker, the lead social worker on the unit, know exactly what happened and what we would want her to work on. And we check in with her. And so we want the women to learn that some of that behavior that she's exhibiting is because of what happened to her. So how do we begin to help her to come outside, to not really escape the pain, but try to move outside of that so that she can grow?
So in addition to the topics that I mentioned earlier, the 6 things that we go over, each class has a theme, but there's something that kind of flows throughout all of the classes, and that's compassion for yourself and others. Transformation, that transformation is possible, self-love, that something else is possible and she's capable of creating new possibilities. You know, as I said, we have these assignments that we give each week, and when they read them, you hear the grumblings like, oh man, okay, they want me to do all this. But once they do it, it's very cathartic. And one woman said to us, she said, after the work that you give us, I know I can go to college because you make me think. And they realize the scores, we haven't mentioned this, but we often, we give a pre-knowledge evaluation based on the day's subject just to see what do the women know. And some of them are amazed when they get 80s, 90s, 100s on the quiz or the evaluation, because no one's ever told them that they were smart before. And so sometimes we're the first ones to tell them that they're smart, and that's really a shame. And part of the healing process may involve helping a woman to externalize her inner pain. And so some of the assignments that we give, they are really digging deep. And oftentimes we don't ask the assignment to be about her. We, say, tell us about a woman, tell us about a situation where, fill in the blank, and they often get up and say, well, this is my story, even if they change the name. So it really does help her to begin to heal when she's sharing in a safe environment.
Sorry. I was waiting for Katrina to change the slide. So in our curriculum, we talk about intimate partner abuse. And what does it look like? Because you'll hear a lot of the women that they will say, no, I'm not in an abusive relationship. And when we begin to talk about healthy relationships, what does a healthy relationship look like? What does an unhealthy relationship look like? And we get the women to begin to share their story and talk about in their environment, what does it look like? And it is amazing to see at times the transformation. Some of the women will start off saying, it's okay for me to argue with my partner. It's okay for me, and most of the time. And it's okay for me to throw things. It's okay for me to, so all of this. And then when we begin to explore the healthiness of it and what is that healthy relationship, the women begin to teach each other and share with each other. And so we take a step back and we just, if you will, facilitate that process, but the healing begins in the group with the women together. The dynamics of the whole perspective begin to shift. And you see a new norm start to emerge in the group, where when the women begin to talk about relationships, this is what a healthy relationship look like. When I leave here, I will no longer find myself in a relationship where I am being slapped around. I am being cursed at. I understand now my self-worth, and I will not participate in that. So it's awesome when we see the shift in the language, the shift in the behavior, the shift just throughout the work that we're doing with the women.
So we've talked a lot about relationships, and so in this work we're developing a lot of relationships. We're developing relationships with the women that are in our group. You'll notice the title of the class is, again, Transforming One Woman at a Time, Reintegration Support. And we don't go into it in this particular webinar, but it consists of the pre-release work, so the work on the inside while she's still incarcerated, and also the reintegration support about the work that we do with her once she's home. So it is really important for us to develop a relationship with each of the women so that we get to know each other, so she knows who we are and how we operate and what we expect of each other. And then it's also about the women within the group building relationships. So some of them can be from the same unit, but they never really spoke to each other, or they're from different units and they find, and I think Laura talked about this at one point, that when she was in the class with us, there were a lot of women from one particular unit, and so they would leave the classroom and then support each other. They would work on the work together, and it almost began to, that good feeling that left the classroom, or that safe space, began to permeate the unit. And so it really had an amazing effect on those women. But we're also developing relationships with the staff. So we've got COs, social workers, the warden, and we've been really fortunate in the jail that we're in. We're approaching 3 years now that we've had really good staff to work with. And every day we're learning and getting to know new COs, but they're also getting to know who we are. And there are times when we go, we tell the women we're going to show up, and I think that's my next slide, or it's one of the slides. And we've shown up on holidays, we've shown up in snowstorms, and so perhaps they're short-staffed at that moment. But there are a few COs that go, oh no, we know I'm free, let's let them in. We're going to, do something special to make sure that they can come in because the women are looking forward to them being there. So it's really important that if you're not an employee of a particular jail or correctional institution and you're a volunteer coming in, that you're developing relationships with a number of staff members, because it'll make your life that much easier. You'll have that many more people as your own personal cheerleaders. And so I think this might still be me too. So we know that men and women are experiencing a lot of barriers after incarceration, but there are additional barriers for women. So about 45% of women will recidivate or return within 3 years. Many return within 6 months of release due to the challenges of surviving in the community. And in the 3 years that we've been at RCF, we've seen women who have, been back. We'll see somebody in the hallway and I said, "We thought you were released," and she says, "No, I'm back. I was released, but I'm back." So when women have unresolved trauma, along with mental and physical health challenges and substance abuse issues, they habitually cycle through the judicial system. And without interventions to get her to realize that there's a different way of doing things, that she can take control of some aspects of her life, that the women are just going to continue to do that. So we certainly help them to try to reestablish relationships with their family and children, because that's a huge barrier. Safe and sober housing is one that we've been trying to figure out how we're going to solve that problem for the last 4 years now, and it's still a hope of ours that we can have a safe place for women to come home to. Employment, I said earlier that the women that we work with have lack legal work history, so finding legal employment can be very difficult when you have a record, but also when you have no other employable skills. And then coming back into the community can be quite difficult for women as well. When a man tends to reenter, his community embraces him and tells him, "Welcome home." But she, unfortunately, is looked down upon as, there's something wrong with you. Women aren't supposed to go to jail. You're a bad mother. You're a bad woman. And so the stigma is a little bit more difficult for women to overcome.
And so the fortunate thing about us working in the jail that we're working in is that when we talk to the warden and the head social worker, they are in agreement with us in that we believe that reentry starts on day one. And the warden there believes that as well, and that's why he allows a number of reentry training programs into the jail, so that the day that the women walk in, they could actually have access to programs that will help them to shift from incarceration back to their communities. And so a part of what we do at I'm Free is we want to build that relationship. And if we could get her on day one, actually we want her at the end of her stay. So if we can get her anywhere from 90 to 30 days release, we would like to work with her then, because one of the things that we do is that we say to her, if in fact you complete this 6-week course, what we would like to do is to continue this relationship with you, because we know that building a relationship, and as women we are relational beings, so building a relationship, a healthy functioning adult relationship, is important. And so we try to do that with her. We offer her on her way out if she needs someone to meet her at the gate, because there are times when they are released very late at night with a token and $1, I guess, and if the buses are not running, how does she get home? And so she can find herself in a situation just trying to get home from prison. So we say to her, we're willing to pick you up if you need that assistance, to take you to that safe place. We go to court with her. If she is in our class and she needs to have her lawyer or the judge know that she is really trying to shift the way she's being on the planet, we will definitely go to support her if she is doing the work on the inside. Once she's out, we take her to lunch. We sit down with her, hopefully, if we can get her within a week's time, to sit down to help her to begin to organize what does these next 2, 3, 4 weeks look like for you. Do you have appointments? How are you going to make these appointments? We do one-on-one group sessions with them. One-on-one sessions and group sessions with them. And if there is something that we cannot handle, we have no problem referring her out. We believe that in order for the work that we do to really be strong and meaningful for the sisters, that we have to not try to take on all of it on our own. There are organizations and companies out there that can help her to transition as well. And so we're really big believers, and we don't want to be the end-all, to be all for her. We also offer what we call our dignity bag. There are some sisters who will go into the prison, and maybe she's going in the summer and she has on shorts and a T-shirt, or she's going in the winter and she's coming out in the summer, and vice versa, or she's coming out and she's much heavier. We don't want her to have to wear her prison uniform out. So what we created was what we call our dignity bag. And in that dignity bag, as you can see there, are toiletries, and we have a number, like at least 2-3 changes of clothing for her. We get her towels and stuff that she's going to actually need the first few days out. And that's our dignity bag. But they will, in order to get that dignity bag, you would have had to been with us for the 6-week training. So if a sister calls us who is just being released, we won't say no to her. We definitely, if she needs something, we're going to make sure to get it to her. It might not be as much stuff, but we're not going to say no to her. And I'm going to leave it there so that we can have time for Laura. I just want to take a moment to tell you how awesome this next presenter is. She was in the training, and she is an amazing woman. Laura?
Yes.
I'm
here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes. We can. So we would like for you to just start talking.
Okay, so it started off with telling my story. And my story is I was in an orphanage in Korea, suffered a lot of abuse in Korea, came over here to the United States and had several failed adoptions, or potential adoptive families. Came to my wonderful mom now, who's when I was 6 years old. The next question is, what was the shift in your life that got you involved in criminal activity? And I believe that Dr. Renee and Patrina have touched on this. I was in an abusive marriage, and at the time I didn't think that it was abusive, but after years of it, you start getting worn away. Well, I realized that that was not the marriage I wanted to be in, and it turned into a horrific custody battle and divorce. In my mind at that time, I felt that if I just went away, my children wouldn't have to suffer through the divorce and the custody. Doing that, of course, leads you to do all sorts of things, hanging around with the wrong people, making poor choices. For myself, I pretty much felt that I was on a death mission. I didn't care who I hung around with. I didn't care what I did. And it caused me to make poor choices, and I landed in Riverside Correctional Facility. It asks what my experience was like at Riverside. Riverside was very scary. I have never been incarcerated or been in trouble, and here I am now stuck with 1,500 women who all have the same thing. We have been mixed up in the criminal system. So at that point, I started to really reflect on myself. I realized I wasn't getting out. My family had been destroyed. Relationship with my mother was not good at all. After coming to terms with my situation, I realized that I needed to start utilizing whatever programs I could inside Riverside. And went to the social worker, and the social worker told me about this program called I'm Free. And I think that Dr. Renee and Patrina have heard me say this before. I had no idea what I was walking into. All I knew was that it was getting me off the unit and keeping me from staying in my cell all day. So I remember when I first walked inside to Free's program, and Dr. Renea was just, I mean, her energy is infectious, and the same with Patrina. And they bounce off each other, which is really, really good. It was just a positive environment, which is something incredibly hard to find inside Riverside, probably any jail. I remember when I first walked in there, I was a little taken back because many women from my unit were in there, and I was in maximum security. So you had, all people who assault charges, all sorts of people, and I wasn't sure in the beginning if I was going to open up, and I could see the other women were like that too. But as the classes went on, it was actually a very amazing shift. We all started to really warm up to each other. started to notice the various talents that we all had, and we started to become human to each other. And a couple weeks in, when we would leave Free's class, it did, just like Katrina said, it filtered into the unit. So that if I was having a bad day, somebody who was in the Free class would come up and ask me, are you all right? Whereas before that program, they would have never paid me any attention. So it started to turn into a sisterhood. Inside with Free, they always told you that when you get out, as long as you finish the class, when you get out, they would be there for you. And they held true to it. Now, while I was inside, Dr. Renea called my mom, knowing that the relationship with my mom was not good at all, and she had a conversation, actually spoke with my mom to let her know the things that were going on inside and see if there was some type of plan on where I was going to go, because at that point we did not think I was going to live with my mother. And when I came home, I called, and they were in my house very quickly, and we sat and we spoke, and they actually hooked me up with my first paid internship when I came out, which gradually started to put me back into the middle class that I had grown up in. It started to change me. It started to transform me, which is exactly what they do, transforming one woman at a time. I don't know what I would do without I'm Free. I'm probably one of the biggest advocates. I love I'm Free. They really do what they say they're going to do. Just having a conversation with me inside in those weeks that I had made me realize that what I went through did not define me. Yes, I have a criminal record. Yes, I have a felony. Yes, I have a hard time finding a job. But what it did was it refined me. So now I'm able to say, well, you know what, this is what I did, but look at where I've come. And I know that I can call Dr. Renea and Katrina, which I have, for something so small, but I just needed their support. It says here, how are you paying it forward? Well, of course, like I said, I'm going to be with I'm Free forever. I will do whatever they ask me to do. I also currently work with another prison ministry, and I am lucky enough to go inside the jail 2 days a week. And a lot of the women I already know from being there. So I stay in contact with many of the women who are incarcerated, and I try to explain to them that I am still on my journey. Even though I'm articulate and I say these things, I still am learning how to live. And what I've always said is I'm Free has taught me to think about what I'm thinking about, which was something that I never did before. And what it made me realize was that I do suffer from a mental illness, which I believe many of the women do that are in jail. And so this journey of becoming a better person and transforming into the woman that I want to be has been wonderful with the support that I get from Katrina and Dr. Renea. And in closing, I just want to read the one email that I got from text from my oldest daughter. She said, I thought I lost my mom and I was never getting her back, but you're back and better than ever. So that's my story.
Awesome, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, boy. Laura, every time I hear that, I'm just so grateful that and humbled that I do what I love and what I'm supposed to do on this planet. And so you make me feel proud to do the work that I do. Before I start crying, I'm going to move on. So some of the things that we've developed over the years with the training that we do, the different presentations that we do, we talk about changing minds and transforming lives. I mean, that's what we do. We want people to begin to shift the way they're being on the planet, just slightly. And once you do that, as Katrina said, once you do that, you're gonna show up differently. And so we just try to just give our sisters just that little nugget, if you will, that she can transform. We're not asking her to do it overnight. It's not going to happen overnight, but it will happen. And so we get excited about that. There are 5 principles that we used as we began to develop all of the stuff that we do. And so they are the gender responsive, we believe that everything we do, one, because we are women, but two, because we see that there are a lot more programs out there for men than there are for women, and as women, we're not supposed to do things that will get us enslaved behind bars, if you will. And so it's real important to us to come from that perspective. We need to know that what we're doing is really about the sisters that we're working with. Trauma-informed. A lot of us have experienced that. So can we begin to operate out of that place where we are acknowledging that that is probably the case with all of us? So let's not re-traumatize people. So we look from that perspective as well. The third one is psychoeducational processing. Group psychology is my passion. How we operate in groups, how we show up in groups is important. And how do we begin to educate people about how they're being? And so that's one of the principles that we operate out of often as well. And the adult learning theory, because of who I am, I truly believe that one, each one, reach one, teaches one. But two, when you begin to teach, you need to understand how to do that. And so don't assume that everyone that you are trying to give information to is taking it in from, if you will, a reading perspective or writing. Some people, they're visual or auditory or, kinesthetic. So we in our getting information to people, we try to come from all different perspectives. I want her to show up in her glory. If she can't do it through reading, then maybe she can sing that song for us. Maybe she can draw that thing out for us. Maybe there's a movement that will express what it is she's feeling. And so we come from that perspective. And the cognitive behavioral transformation, that's key to us as well. So some of the lessons learned over the years is that we didn't always, in the beginning, collect data. We decided that we were going to go in and we were going to love up on the women. We were not going to collect any data. Well, we did it ourselves, and I believe the sisters are a disservice by not doing that. I'm trying to think of some of the other learning.
In the beginning, we talk about building relationships and how important it is on the inside, and that's because of something that we learned. For example, we only worked with the head social worker probably our first year there, maybe even the first 2 years there, and we wondered why we weren't necessarily getting all of the women that we needed or wanted, or the women weren't yet sentenced, so here we are waiting for them on the outside, and they were still in the jails. So we began to develop a relationship with all of the social workers. And as they began to understand who we are and what we do, they would recommend women to be in our classes. And so now, when we send a report after each class, just kind of letting them know what the themes were this week, some of the aha moments, and who was in attendance, who wasn't, we send it to everybody. The warden gets a report, the social workers, everybody. Anybody who we have an email for, they get it. So people understand who we are and what we do.
I can remember, I remember another lesson learned. We used to do our pre and post. Yes. So we do a pre and post evaluation. And in the beginning, what we were doing was we were giving it to the group in the first hour, the beginning of the first hour, the pre, and then we would give the post at the end of the second hour. Well, that probably wasn't the best way to do it. And so we did shift in the way we were presenting that. So now they get to take it back. They still get one in the beginning of the first hour, but they get to take it back with them and work on it and then bring it back the next week. So that's one of the shifts we made.
And one other thing that we did, and I don't know if anyone else has made this mistake, but as a part of, along with what Dr. Renee said about not collecting information, one of the things that we thought, well, we do need her name. We need contact information, right? But we didn't want to collect a bunch of information in the beginning for people who weren't going to stay. So earlier I said we might have up to 20 women in a class, and on day one we do. And once they realize how much work we're going to give them, they self-select out. So, you know, by day 2 we might have 15 women in the class. And also other things that are happening, women being released, or, you know, so the numbers might dwindle by the time we get to the 5th or 6th week. And in the beginning, we decided we weren't going to collect information until the end. That way we captured the ones who were there the whole time. And again, that was a disservice because there were a lot of women that we touched, but we just didn't have a way to reach out to them afterwards. We only knew the ones who actually completed the 6 weeks. So now we collect in the beginning.
And one of the things that I think is working for us is that we truly allow the women to come in and know that they are active participants in their healing process. And so they can take ownership of leading the groups that we have, and they love it. Just yesterday was our last group for cohort 16. And so the warden was in there, and I have to say my sisters shine. They were in there taking responsibility, leading the group, talking and just showing who they really are.
And so those are lessons that we learned, but there's some lessons that we want others to learn, and that's understanding trauma in order to support healing and avoid re-traumatization. We want to focus on the person, not her offense, build on her strengths, and help her reduce the barriers to her success. And acknowledge that adults learn in multiple ways, so be creative. You know, what works for one may not work for all. And ultimately changing your language. So Dr. Renea often says that women are not needy, they have different needs. And so those are some of the things that I'm Free really wants to get across to the broader community. And what we're hoping is the future of I'm Free is that we are beyond Philadelphia, that we are a national replicable model at some point, and so stay tuned. Stay tuned. Let's see. We've got some resources here, first being the National Clearinghouse for the Defense of Battered Women. There's some really good information on their website. And if you're not familiar with the National Reentry Resource Center or the National Resource Center on Justice Involved Women, both of those have amazing information. I use it for my reading pleasure. And then the Women's Prison Association out of New York also has great resources that we turn to them quite a bit. Thank you. And questions, we're at the end. On the screen we've got our contact information. imfreeonline@gmail.com is our email address. Our website, www.imfreeonline.org, where you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. And if I can have a second to do an advertisement, Sue, we are about to host our 2nd annual Partners in Freedom fundraising event. It's coming up this Tuesday, so for those of you who are in Philadelphia or in Pennsylvania and can get here, it's going to be Tuesday, June 16th, and we're honoring a fantastic woman, Chaplain Phyllis B. Taylor, who was a system-wide chaplain for the Philadelphia prison systems for years. And she's going to be our honoree this year for our Partners in Freedom Award. And our keynote speaker is going to be Dr. Beth Ritchie out of Chicago, and we are so excited to have her. That's it. So if you're looking for more information, you can find that on our website.
Thank you so much to all our speakers today. That was great. And as Dot and I said, we were actually able to listen to the end of the webinar this time because we weren't having tech problems. So it was great to hear Laura's story and to hear the end of the webinar. So thank you so much. We have a couple questions here.
Okay.
And I have some from this session and a few from last session, okay? So early on, someone asked, what is the typical size of your 6-week class?
And we've had, the largest I think was 22. and the smallest was 3, and somewhere in between. Again, we've said to the women, if you are committed to us, we'll commit to you. And so this was early on. It might have been the second cohort where we started probably with a small number, maybe 7, and some got released and some decided it wasn't right for them. And at the end we had 3 women, and we said to them, you know, if you commit, we'll commit to you. So we were there for those 3. And one of our mistakes was one of our largest classes in the beginning, on the last day we had 18 women, and on the very last day they were all on lockdown. So none of them were able to actually come to class that day, and we had given the information, the contact information, given it to them on week 5 for them to return on week 6, and so we never had a week 6 with that class. But so yeah, we've gone from anywhere from 3 to 20.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I also just want to say that every time I hear about your dignity bags, I get excited and thrilled all over again. It's just, they're so terrific, and I just love the name and actually what you include in them as well. So I think that's just a terrific thing.
Awesome, thank you.
So, another question here is about PTSD, going back to the beginning of the presentation. Vicki said she has always believed that there had to be a life-threatening event. Living life, we all have numerous crises, and some of them can be horrible, but there was not a life-threatening event. Not speaking of victims of abuse, just asking in general. And is that part of your definition?
Actually, well, the SAMHSA definition that we've used is, you know, 2 people can be in the same event and they experience it differently, and one is not fazed and the other is completely traumatized, and their life may not have been threatened by it. It's how an individual experiences something. And yeah, I mean, it's such an individual experience. So, you know, one of the presentations that we have a number of things a list of things that are traumatic, and one presentation we did, somebody said, you don't have jail up there. And so that's not necessarily a life-threatening experience, but it's very traumatic, and depending on what happens to her while she's there, she can be reliving those negative experiences for years and years to come.
Thank you, Katrina. And Vicki, I would agree that there's a lot of different definitions out there, and some of them do include, as you suggested, a life-threatening event, and some of them do not. So that's what we have also seen. So I would agree with what Katrina said, that it does vary. Another question, and this was actually from last time, which was, do you run Transforming One Woman at a Time, the group, outside in the community or only in RCF?
No, we run it. We run it in the jail and on the outside. We've had a number of correctional community correctional facilities that we've run the training out of. So it's not just inside, but it is working with women who have had that experience or who is going through that experience of being incarcerated.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You talked about early on in the presentation about modeling behaviors. Yeah. Can you give some examples of how you do that? You gave some, but can you give some more?
Sure. So let me try to find a true story here. The way in which we speak to the women, the way we interact with them, how we answer their questions, the tone in which we use with them, and when they are, for example, there was a situation where, and the women said that they were playing, but in that moment, it was a teaching moment, we had to share with them that in that playing, it was hurtful. So they would say things like, hey, ugly girl, or hey, fat girl, or black girl, or, you know, something like that. So in that moment, we began to teach and to show them what it felt like to us, what it looks like to us, and then have them talk about the one who was saying it and the one who it was said to. And so that's how we begin to at least attempt to model some of the behaviors that we want them to exhibit while they're there and hopefully when they're out. So the yelling and screaming, if something happens, so one of the other things we talked about is if something happens in a group and someone is being negative, instead of being punitive or wanting to disrespect her in any way, we lift her up instead.
Oh, that's helpful. Thank you. I believe we asked this last time, but for this group, do you have numbers on the recidivism rates for women who have completed your T1W program?
Unfortunately, we don't. Recidivism numbers are so tough. We have not been able to get that information directly from the jails, and so the short answer is no. The long answer is we're trying to figure out how we can better track data and information and keep track of the women when they're out, where they go, so that we can follow up with them and see, how they're doing, what they're doing, and where they're doing it.
Another question, this was from last time, but I believe Inez is also on this one.
Okay.
Many of the problems that she has encountered are generated by some of the corrections staff who are judgmental, vindictive, and punitive. How do we educate and change this behavior?
Well, it's really interesting, that question, because we just had that conversation with the warden on Monday. We had the warden of Riverside come in and do a presentation. We've had the opportunity to go into the prison and work with the social work staff to do an in-service with them. And so we talked to the warden about doing more of those in-services, because he's really trying to change the
culture?
Right, thank you. The culture of the prison and getting people trauma-informed and gender-responsive information so that they can work better with the population. However, we know that it's going to take some time. So short answer to that is, if you can get into the prisons and begin to talk to the warden, if you can make that relationship happen with the warden or with the lead social worker and just have an opportunity to present to that staff, at least we're starting somewhere.
And sometimes it's one-on-one interactions. You might engage with an officer that says something, and you kind of take a breath, hold your tongue, but then perhaps again you're offering them different language.
Right.
And helping them to rephrase what they just said. So, it's not putting them down, it's not calling them out, but just rephrasing it, and they might adopt that language.
Right.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question, and that is, how do you find or choose the women for the group in the jail, and do you consider it an open or closed or a psychoeducational group, or more than one of those things?
I'm not sure I understand the open or closed. Do you know that?
So there are 6 sessions. If they are there for the first, they can only miss one group. And so if they miss the first 1 or 2 sessions, they can. Those who were there will stay. They cannot. We will not allow anyone else in because of the dynamics that really start to form after day 1. It is a psychoeducational group. And the way we select them, actually we don't select them, the social workers select them.
And the women self-select.
That's true too.
So there's a lot of referrals from women to women. My cellie should be here. Here's her name and number, or her PP number for next time. Or, so we always have people giving us join at that point, but it's like, give me your name, give me your information, and I will make sure you get on the list for next time. So the social workers do recommend the women based on their status and when they're supposed to be getting out, but often they self-select, and we've had great experience and great advertisers, if you will, among the women who have taken the class, that they talk it up, and so we've got a wait list. You know, we always have women who are wanting to get in the class and unfortunately can't.
Thank you. And so we're coming to the end of the presentation, so I just want to thank everybody for their participation, and thank you, Laura, Dr. Renea, and Petrina for doing this whole presentation one more time. And I just wonder, do all three of you or any of the three of you have final words that you'd like to share?
Oh, final words. I should say yes, but I don't have any.
It's okay. Laura?
Yeah. I'll say what I said at the end of the video. I'm free from negativity. I'm free from discouragement. I'm free because of I'm free.
Oh, that's
awesome.
Thank you.
That's really
well said,
beautiful.
Laura. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Renea,
Thank you.
Yes?
do you have anything you'd like to add, or is that just the perfect ending from Laura?
I believe that is the perfect ending.
Okay.
I think we all are free.
Okay. So thanks to everybody who participated, and if you would take, 2 minutes to fill in the little evaluation that will pop up when you sign out, that would be terrific, or there will be a link to it in the email that you'll get in about a half an hour. And some of you have asked for us to send you the link, and we'll do that, and then we will post it on our website in about 7 to 10 days, so you can look for it there as well. Okay, so thank you all.
Thank you.
Hope to see you again
Bye-bye.
soon. And Renea and Petrina, I want you to know that Dot did put up information about your upcoming event in the chat box.
Oh, I missed it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Dot.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.